At 3 a.m., Jason Miller's fence was being bulldozed by people pretending to be HOA security, an outrageous violation of his property and peace. The culprit, his neighbor, Caroline Banks, used deceit and greed to try to expand her land, hiding behind a false sense of authority. But Jason's teenage son Eric grabbed a tractor and a camera, turning the chaos into undeniable evidence that would flip the situation completely. And just wait to see how this nighttime showdown unfolded, as justice ultimately prevailed in the most satisfying way. It was just past 3 a.m., and the quiet hum of the night had settled over the Miller property like a thick blanket. Jason Miller was deep in sleep, the kind of sleep where the mind drifts freely and nothing feels urgent, when a dull, almost mechanical thud stirred him awake. At first he thought it was a branch falling or some animal rummaging in the yard, but then a low, grinding rumble followed, vibrating through the floorboards. His heart immediately kicked into overdrive. Something was wrong. Jason swung his legs over the side of the bed, trying to quiet the growing panic in his chest. His bedroom window overlooked the back fence, and as his eyes adjusted to the darkness, he squinted through the shadows. What he saw made him freeze in disbelief. Two figures moved deliberately near the edge of his property, wearing bright vests that screamed HOA security under the dim glow of the moonlight. But the vests were cheap-looking and ill-fitting, almost comical, yet the threat they carried felt terrifyingly real. The men were operating a small bulldozer, a machine that hummed with purpose, pushing Jason's wooden fence down piece by piece. Each splintered plank seemed to echo in the silence of the night. The fence, which had stood for years marking the boundary of his family's land, was being destroyed before his eyes. Jason's mind struggled to comprehend it. HOA security? At 3 a.m.? Destroying his property? Nothing made sense. There was no warning, no knock, no explanation, just chaos and the grinding metal of the bulldozer against the fence posts. A surge of adrenaline shot through him, pulling him fully awake. He ran to his son's room. Eric, 14, had always been quick on his feet and endlessly curious about the farm equipment on the property. Jason shook him awake, his voice urgent but controlled. "Eric, wake up, now! There's trouble outside. Get the tractor." Eric's eyes snapped open, the initial confusion giving way to recognition as he saw the panic in his father's face. He didn't need to ask questions. Growing up on this property, he had learned quickly how to handle emergencies, even in the dead of night. With practiced efficiency, he slid out of bed and grabbed the old farm tractor keys from the hook near the garage. A GoPro camera lay on the workbench, a forgotten gift from his birthday, and he grabbed that too, instinctively knowing this moment needed to be documented. Outside, the night air hit them sharply. The chill was biting, but neither of them noticed. Jason's heart raced, a mix of fear and disbelief keeping him on edge. Every crunch of the bulldozer hitting the fence sounded louder than it was, every creak and snap sending a jolt through his chest. The figures moved methodically, unaware of the family observing from the shadows, or perhaps confident that nobody would interfere at this hour. Jason felt a knot of dread in his stomach, a mix of shock and confusion. Why now? Why at this hour? His mind raced through every possibility, each one more impossible than the last. The realization slowly sank in. Someone had come onto his property, disguised as security, and was destroying his home's boundary while he slept. The audacity of it was staggering, and the fear of what might come next made his hands shake. Eric climbed onto the tractor, the engine roaring to life under his small but steady hands. The GoPro was secured on the dashboard, ready to capture everything. Jason took a deep breath, bracing himself for whatever was about to unfold, his mind a whirlwind of disbelief, anger, and determination. This was no ordinary night. Something had crossed the line, and they would make sure the world knew exactly what happened. Jason and Eric stepped out into the crisp night air, their breaths forming thin clouds in the faint light of the moon. The yard felt impossibly large and eerily quiet, except for the constant crunch of the bulldozer against the fence. The fake guards turned toward them, startled at the sudden appearance of the family. Almost immediately they began shouting, their voices harsh and insistent, as if the law itself were on their side. "Step back! This is legal! You can't stop us!" One barked, waving a hand toward the broken fence with exaggerated authority. Jason froze for a moment, absorbing the absurdity. Legal? This was destruction of private property in the dead of night. His shock from moments before now morphed into something darker, something hot and sharp. Hatred. Hatred for the audacity of these imposters, for their casual defiance of right and wrong, and for the invisible forces that allowed such actions to go unchecked. Every word they shouted felt like a punch in the gut. The calm, quiet life he had known on his property was under attack, and these strangers acted as if it were nothing. As he looked closer, Jason noticed a familiar figure watching from the edge of the neighbor's yard. Caroline Banks, his next-door neighbor, stood with a mix of impatience and smug satisfaction on her face. The realization hit him like a thunderclap. She was behind this. The pieces started to fall into place. Caroline had been eyeing that strip of land for months, plotting to expand her backyard and eventually sell the property for profit. Her scheme had relied on hiding behind the HOA's name, using it as a shield to make her personal ambition look legitimate. Jason's mind raced. He thought of all the times Caroline had smiled politely at neighborhood meetings, praising the HOA's rules as though they were sacred. He remembered her careful comments about property lines and neighborhood aesthetics, all while quietly plotting to manipulate the system for her gain. The anger inside him swelled, feeding off the injustice of it. She wasn't just breaking rules, she was weaponizing the system to attack his family, using the guise of authority to do so. Eric's hand tightened on the tractor controls, sensing his father's rising anger. Jason's voice, firm and trembling with intensity, broke the silence. "This isn't right. None of this is legal. You can't just come onto someone's property and destroy it." The fake guards responded with defensive bluster, but their words sounded hollow, even to them. Jason could see it in their posture, the confidence of authority slipping in the face of moral clarity. The mix of emotions roared within him: disbelief, frustration, and a deep, righteous hatred for both the individuals committing the act and the system that allowed such schemes to flourish. It was a stark realization that sometimes the fight wasn't only against one person, but against an entire structure that could be manipulated by those willing to bend rules for personal gain. As he stood there, Jason's hatred solidified into resolve. This was no longer just a shocking attack on their property. It was an injustice that demanded a response. He glanced at Eric, and in that moment, father and son shared a silent understanding. They would not let this stand. The night that had begun with confusion and fear was now charged with determination. The system might allow trickery, but it could not withstand courage, strategy, and the truth. And Jason was ready to prove it. Eric didn't hesitate. His hands gripped the steering wheel of the old farm tractor, and with a roar of the engine breaking the night's eerie stillness, he began moving toward the small bulldozer. Every second counted. Every delay could allow the fence to be reduced to splintered boards beyond repair. The headlights cut through the shadows, revealing the two fake guards scrambling as they tried to maneuver the bulldozer more quickly. Eric's face was set in determined focus, his earlier fear replaced by a precise, controlled energy. The GoPro camera mounted on the dashboard tilted slightly as it captured the unfolding scene, recording everything with unflinching clarity. Jason followed close behind, shouting commands and trying to assert control over the escalating situation. "Stop! Get out of here! You don't have permission!" His voice carried across the yard, steady and resolute despite the adrenaline racing through him. The neighbors, drawn by the noise and strange lights in the middle of the night, began stepping out of their homes. The quiet cul-de-sac, usually calm and orderly, now buzzed with tension and curiosity. From porches and windows, people watched as a confrontation that felt almost cinematic unfolded before them. The fake guard's confidence, which had seemed so bold only moments ago, began to crack. They looked at each other with hesitation, unsure how to respond to a teenage boy driving a tractor directly at them and an angry homeowner demanding accountability. Each plank the bulldozer attempted to push down was met with the sudden barrier of the tractor, creating a tangible line of resistance. Jason's anger, once a burning frustration in his chest, transformed into a controlled, powerful determination. He realized that force alone wasn't the answer. Documentation, witnesses, and strategy were equally important. The tractor moved with deliberate precision, blocking access to the fence while giving Jason a vantage point to confront the intruders. Every movement was calculated, and the camera captured it all. The guards' panicked gestures, the futile attempts to continue demolition, and Jason's steady, commanding presence. There was no question that this was a violation. The evidence was undeniable. The chaotic noise of the engine, the splintering wood, and the shouted orders created a symphony of tension that seemed to suspend time itself. Jason noticed the expressions of the neighbors changing from curiosity to concern, then to support. People began whispering, some even stepping forward to record on their phones. The yard had become a stage, and every person witnessing it contributed to the moral weight of the situation. The fake guards realized that their actions were no longer anonymous. Their pretense of legality was unraveling under the gaze of the community. For Jason, the shift from anger to action was empowering. The initial shock, the deep hatred for the audacity of the intruders, had crystallized into a tangible response. The tractor wasn't just a vehicle. It was a shield, a statement, a line drawn in the dirt that said, "You will not succeed here." Every turn of the wheel, every shouted command, every frame captured on the GoPro became proof that the family was standing firm against injustice. As the night stretched on, the chaos gradually slowed. The guards hesitated, unsure, their confidence evaporating under the relentless presence of the father and son team. Rage had been transformed into strategy, fear into clarity. What began as a terrifying intrusion had now become a moment of empowerment, with Jason and Eric asserting control while the night sky bore witness to their unwavering determination. The first rays of sunlight spilled over the Miller property, bathing the backyard in a warm, golden glow. The events of the night before had left an electric tension in the air, but now, as Jason stepped outside, he felt a calm satisfaction that was both rare and deeply deserved. The fence, though battered in places, still stood firm, a symbol not just of property lines, but of resilience, courage, and the refusal to be intimidated. For Jason, every plank that remained upright was a testament to the night's struggle, a quiet victory that resonated far beyond the physical barrier itself. Eric followed close behind, the GoPro camera clutched tightly in his hands. His eyes shone with pride and relief. The adrenaline from the confrontation had faded, replaced by the deep understanding that what they had done mattered, not just to them, but to everyone who had witnessed it through the lens of the camera. Eric's courage, quick thinking, and willingness to act decisively had turned a frightening ordeal into undeniable evidence. That small device in his hands had captured truth in a way that words alone could not. By mid-morning, the video had begun circulating online. Social media lit up with reactions. Neighbors shared it. Local community pages commented. And soon enough, local news outlets picked up the story. Clips of the tractor blocking the bulldozer, of Jason confronting the imposters, and the visible panic of the fake security spread across feeds, making it impossible to ignore what had happened. The narrative was clear. A family had stood up against intimidation and deceit, and they had won. The HOA could no longer maintain their facade. Under the scrutiny of cameras, witnesses, and community outrage, they were forced to admit that the so-called security had acted illegally. Caroline Banks, the neighbor whose greed had set the entire episode into motion, faced consequences she could not evade. Fines were levied, and she was ordered to restore the fence to its original state. The system, flawed and sometimes manipulable, had nonetheless delivered justice. Swift, visible, and undeniable. Jason watched as work crews arrived to repair and reinforce the damaged fence. He felt a quiet satisfaction that ran deeper than mere victory. It was a moment that confirmed the principle he had tried to teach Eric for years. Standing up for what is right, even in the face of fear and uncertainty, has tangible power. It wasn't just about a fence or a plot of land. It was about integrity, courage, and defending what belongs to you with clarity and composure. Eric, standing beside him with the camera still in hand, grinned widely. "We did it, Dad," he said, his voice full of pride and disbelief. Jason smiled, placing a steady hand on his son's shoulder. In that moment, the fear, shock, and anger of the previous night melted away, leaving only the joy of triumph. They had faced intimidation, uncertainty, and greed, and they had emerged victorious. The final image was simple yet profound. Father and son sitting together on the porch, bathed in sunlight, the repaired fence stretching behind them like a statement of perseverance. Their eyes met briefly, sharing unspoken gratitude and pride. For the audience watching this story unfold, the moment delivered the kind of satisfaction that only comes when wrongdoing is met with consequence, courage is recognized, and justice, however long delayed, is finally realized. The narrative had reached its emotional peak, leaving behind a sense of closure, triumph, and hope that integrity and bravery still matter.